Okay, so this is my first recording. I've had the desire to create something, but I've also had resistance for some time, and I've decided today is the day. So this is my first recording, and this recording is going to be about a mushroom experience I had back in 2002 that is what opened me up to spirituality. So a little bit of context. At that time in 2002, um I was recently married and living in a nice home in Anaheim Hills area, and I had a newborn daughter, from about a year previous. She was born, shortly before 9/11 happened, and I was doing well. We were doing well. My wife and I were both working. I was doing commercial real estate, and she was a successful paralegal. We were working hard. We were playing hard. On the weekends, we would typically drink quite a bit and party, and it was sort of a life in the fast lane, but also work hard and work hard, play hard. It was sort of that dynamic. So I was born, I was raised in Orange County, like I said, in a very conservative household, and I followed in my father's beliefs of atheism, and I was very proud of my atheism. I wore it as a badge of honor. I felt it was a reflection of how much of a realist I was. I felt that people that were spiritual or religious, which I lumped into the same category, along with astrology and ghosts and all these people were all just kind of out there, and we're kind of weak-minded sheep, if you can imagine, this sort of the sheeple idea, following stuff that's not real, not following science, and really needing some sort of fairy tale belief system, or fairy tales, religion, different things, heaven and hell, to keep them in order and to give them hope that there was something, beyond physical life. I saw that I believed that the religions, and again, I lumped spirituality. I made no distinction between spirituality and religion at the time. I certainly do now. But I just saw them as just the biggest scam in the history of the world. They're basically tax-free entities that were collecting all these donations, and what were they selling? They were selling afterlife insurance policies that could never be confirmed, and it was just remarkable to me, the stupidity of people that were doing this. So I'm just be honest, that's where I was at, and like I said, I would drink a lot and party and do all kinds of stupid things, but it was all legal. And so I steered clear of the illegal stuff. And if you were doing anything illegal, then you were a criminal and you were a loser. And that was my point of view. That was my reality on life as from my perspective. That's how I saw it. However, my wife, although she drank a lot and was a big part of my whole party scene, she also smoked marijuana. And I would notice that when she smoked, she seemed very reasonable and very high functioning. Whereas if she would drink, more than a few glasses of wine, she would be a complete a mess. So at some point, I decided that I would, join her and try it. And I did. And I was shocked at how benign the experience was in general. I mean, I was expecting it must be pretty harsh, if like it was going to be much more crazy than alcohol, because it's illegal, so it must be some sort of a problem. And I just remember just sort of looking up at the ceiling and looking at the texture in the ceiling and seeing different visions, or seeing different things, and kind of going to a place where I was thinking a little deeper than usual, and some creative thoughts came in, and it was quite nice. And so I was, using marijuana, a couple of times a week for probably a number of months, and seeing the benefits in the creativity, in my connection with my wife, with the intimacy, and how it sort of enhanced intimacy and sex, and of course, the food tastes really good, and even found myself sort of writing some poetry. It was like this really beautiful thing. But I still struggled with the fact of why it was illegal. I couldn't make sense of it. And I remember at some point I just realized, obviously, I can't depend on my government to tell me what is, what is good or bad for me, based on whether it's legal or not. And wow, what else is out there that they say is illegal that's actually a very positive thing? And so I asked my wife what other, drugs she had done. And she said the only other thing she had ever done was mushrooms back in high school and out on the beach. And she had a good time. And I said, well, wow, really? My mind's thinking, well, she's not talking about, mushrooms on a pizza. So I said, you're talking about poisonous mushrooms? And I had the vision of the classic, I forget what it's called, the fly, whatever it is, this red and white, and it looks really like, whoa, what is that, right? It's the Liberty Cap or whatever it is. And she laughed and said, well, I don't think of them as poisonous. I think of them as magic. And so anyway, I said, well, what was the experience like? She's like, I don't really remember, but I remember I laughed a lot. And so that sounded like fun. And so it was worth having that experience. And so I called up my pot dealer, who I had recently found, was now that I was working with marijuana or joining marijuana. And I asked him if he had access to mushrooms. And I could tell by his response, he was pretty surprised that I had asked. And he said, it's funny you asked because I haven't had access to those in many months. But a friend of mine just came through, a couple days ago that I know, and he was returning from being up north, and he had been traveling with the Grateful Dead, and he had mushrooms, and so he had them, and he said they were, really potent and good stuff. And so anyway, I said, great, and I, again, thinking of it in terms of sort of marijuana, and the fact that he said they weren't always readily available, I decided to buy an ounce. And took them home, and I don't remember if it was that day or a couple of days later on the weekend, but my wife and I decided we were going to do some mushrooms. And I remember splitting up the ounce into into a half, and then splitting that again. So I believe basically that my wife and I on that day split a 1/4 ounce of mushrooms, which I think is about I don't know, maybe 7 grams, and then I basically took the majority because I was 50 pounds heavier than her, so I think I took about 2/3 of that. So I think I probably took about 4 grams or so, best I can estimate at this point, which is considered a high dose, especially for a first time, especially doing them with no reverence and no understanding of what I'm getting into, really. But so, I took my share. I put them in a peanut butter sandwich, and I wolfed them down, and I was waiting for the experience, and I think the guy had told me it'll take 45 minutes or so. So I just decided to sit down and start playing some video games. I was playing like some sort of a car race game, like pole position or something along those lines, and crashing and burning and just playing that as this is coming on. And then all of a sudden, after about 45 minutes or so, started feeling a little weird and kind of turned the game off and went and sat on the couch. And, what's going on is the mushrooms are coming on. And for those of you that don't know, the mushroom is psychedelic, which is sort of the term that was used, in the 60s and 70s, maybe 80s. It means mind manifesting. It's describing a particular category of drugs that are psychedelic in nature or mind manifesting in nature. And so there's a dissolution of the ego, because what you're doing is you're opening up the non-physical reality. You're opening up your unconscious. And so the ego operates in the conscious reality, and suddenly it's experiencing something that doesn't fit within its worldview, and it starts to melt, and it's just whoa, right? And so it's Alice in Wonderland, and you're down the rabbit hole. The classic scene where Neo takes the blue pill, right, and he starts to whatever in the mirror, and he starts to get scared. So I'm having that experience, and I don't have any concept of a non-physical reality. I'm an atheist. There is no non-physical reality, and yet I'm experiencing lights and energies and feelings, and so I'm thinking I must be dying. Obviously, I took poisonous mushrooms. I'm dying, and this is just my brain malfunctioning as it's just sort of burning out, and I'm completely convinced that I'm dying, and then I think, oh, my wife is the one that got me to take this poison, and I looked over at her, and she literally was this evil troll, like this gnarly witch, like you would see from the Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, and she's just mocking me, and then I looked around my living room, and it had turned in it was a dungeon. I was in a dungeon, like a medieval dungeon, and the walls had moss on them, and it was cold, and water dripping, and there was iron maidens on the wall, and skeletons of people that had died in there, and it was pure hell. It was the worst experience of my life. I would have given everything I had to just make it go back in time to where I hadn't taken the mushrooms, even if that meant starting out at zero. And like I said, I was in a successful place, but I mean, I was just, please let me just survive this. I've learned my lesson. I'll never do any drugs again. But it was totally real. I was there, and at some point, she got me to leave the living room and go outside up on the deck under the stars, and I had reluctance to do it. I didn't trust her, but by the same token, I was stuck here in hell for eternity, which is interesting because I didn't believe had any belief in heaven or hell, but that seemed to be what was coming up for me. And I guess I believed I was going to hell because I didn't believe in God or whatever, and it was clear there was a non-physical reality, so I'm going to hell, I'm going to this other life. Anyway, she managed to get me out under the stars, and as soon as I got under the stars, I looked up at the stars, and I think it was wanting to leave the misery of hell so bad, and in my mind that I had killed myself, and the stars represented expansion and moving out and moving away from where I was, and I went to the light like people do classically in a near-death experience. I wasn't really physically near death, but I psychologically believed I was dying at 100%. Anyway, I went to the light, and I didn't go but about 8 feet, but I popped out of my physical body, had a classic out-of-body experience, and I'm hovering there literally just about 6-8 feet above my body, looking down at my physical body, which hadn't turned into a lump of flesh. I was still standing there interacting with my wife, but my awareness was now above us looking down, and it was absolutely just amazing. I mean, I couldn't believe what I was experiencing. It was just beyond comprehension, and I was just trying to wrap my mind around that. And then a whole slew of ancestors came to me, and I recognized them, and it was a complete homecoming. It was like, it was literally the same as having a bad dream and then waking up and go, oh, thank God, that was just a dream. This is who I really am, right? It was as if my, not just the experience of being in that, but my whole physical life was the nightmare, so to speak, even though I thought I had a good life. And this was who I really am. This expansive, eternal, indestructible light being is who I am. And when you're out of your body, all your aches and pains, I'm talking physically, I'm also talking emotionally, I'm talking about regrets that we carry, worries about the future that we carry, all of that just dropped away, and I was just in this eternal blissful state and place, and with all these loved ones that I didn't see them physically. I could see them as light beings, and I recognized their energetic signature. I recognized who they were by interacting with their energy, which sounds a little weird, but it was obvious. And I recognized, grandfathers and grandmothers, and then many ancestors that I could sense were my family, but I didn't even know from physical life, many generations back. Anyway, it was pure bliss, and I was just celebrating, and my eyes were tearing. I mean, I don't cry. This was joy of tears of happiness, and this went on for a while, and then at some point, my ancestors said, "Okay, Carl, well, it's time for you to go back into your body." And I'm like, "What do you mean? I just got here. This is the real me. This is where I want to be." And they were like, "No, this was a gift, and this is a grace, so to speak, and it's beautiful. But you need to go back to your body now. You've got a newborn child, and you've got a wife and a family, and it's time to go back." And I had great resistance about going back. And, my fear was that I wasn't going to remember all of this. And it was just going to be like I wake up in the morning and it never happened. And they're like, no, you're going to remember this. Absolutely. This is a gift. This is real. You will remember all of this. And by the way, if you want to, write stuff down in your journal right now, and then you'll read it. So you're not going to. So anyway, they finally convinced me to go back, and I did write a bunch of things down. And as soon as I agreed to go back, I was back in my body, and I spent the remaining, few hours of the experience talking to my wife about it and journaling and just basking in the amazement of it all. And, ultimately finally went to sleep. And the next morning, sure enough, I remembered it all, and I was changed for good at that point. And in that one experience, I was completely freed from the shackles of atheism. And now there was a whole new world for me to explore. There was magic in my life that I hadn't experienced since, since an older neighborhood kid told me that Santa didn't exist when I was, maybe 7 or 8 years old. And, but now, non-physical reality, spirits, reincarnation, paranormal activity, ghosts, astrology, all of these things suddenly opened up to me, and I was hungry to explore them, and made the decision, largely, not fully, but largely in that moment, that I was going to at least continue to explore these things. And it was some powerful experiences I had a year later that really sealed it in, and I'll save that for another video. So I'll leave you with that for now, but it was absolutely an out-of-body experience, and I'm not suggesting that a mushroom experience will always give you an out-of-body. It usually doesn't, but it was the dosage, it was the timing, it was what I needed, it was based on my views on reality, and it was a gift. But yeah, the mushroom experience is what opened me up spiritually, and I will always be in eternal gratitude for the magic mushrooms. So thank you for listening, and I'll be putting out more of these, and feel free to comment and subscribe if you feel moved to. And thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.